Modern life promises happiness just around the corner. From childhood, we're taught to chase achievements, accumulate experiences, and find the one who will finally complete us. Entire industries profit from this endless pursuit. Self-help books, luxury brands, dating apps, all whispering the same message, that if you're still suffering, you're doing something wrong. But what if the very premise is flawed? What if the suffering isn't a detour from the path, but the path itself? Arthur Schopenhauer, one of the most provocative philosophers of the 19th century, argued exactly that. In a world obsessed with positive thinking and endless progress, his message lands like a thunderclap. Life is suffering, not as a mistake, but by design. The ceaseless hunger you feel for love, recognition, meaning, pleasure is not a personal flaw, nor a problem to be solved. It is the direct expression of a deeper metaphysical force he called the will. According to Schopenhauer, the fundamental reality beneath all things is not reason, not purpose, and certainly not divine harmony, but a blind, irrational, and insatiable will that expresses itself in all living beings. You don't have desires, you are desire. You are a vessel through which this will flows, endlessly striving, yearning, aching, never finding rest. Every time you fulfill a desire, the satisfaction is brief and quickly replaced by a new longing. And even when you get what you want, the reward is not joy, but boredom, the empty space between two waves of craving. This cycle, craving, fulfillment, emptiness, repeats endlessly. And while society tells you to try harder, set new goals, seek more pleasure, or buy more things, Schopenhauer invites you to pause and ask a deeper question. What if this structure isn't accidental? What if existence itself is wired for dissatisfaction? This idea is not just philosophical abstraction. It hits at the core of our everyday pain. The relationships that never quite fulfill us, the ambitions that fade into restlessness, the fleeting high of every success that quickly gives way to the next pursuit. If you've ever looked around at your life and wondered, why does nothing ever feel enough? This video is for you. Schopenhauer doesn't offer empty optimism. He doesn't promise happiness in 5 easy steps, but he does offer something far more valuable, a brutal honesty about the nature of existence, and a path, not out of suffering, but through it. By the end of this exploration, you may come to see that your suffering is not a personal failure, but a universal condition, one that once understood can be carried with more clarity, dignity, and even moments of transcendence. Because the truth is, life is suffering. But perhaps the real question isn't how to escape it, but how to bear it. At the heart of Schopenhauer's philosophy lies a single radical insight. The world is not fundamentally rational, nor moral, nor orderly. It is driven by an unrelenting metaphysical force he called the will. Not willpower in the modern psychological sense, but a deeper, primal force, blind, purposeless, and insatiable. This will is not something you consciously control. It is the underlying essence of reality itself, the source from which all life emerges and through which all beings are animated. Every tree that stretches towards sunlight, every predator that hunts, every human ambition, hunger, fear, or craving, all of it is the will striving to assert itself. In Schopenhauer's words, the will is the strong blind man who carries on his shoulders the lame man who can see. Our intellect, our reasoning, calculating minds, is merely a servant of this deeper, irrational will. We justify our desires after we feel them. We think we make decisions based on logic, but in truth, we are constantly reacting to unconscious impulses generated by the will. Nowhere is this more evident than in the endless cycle of human desire. From the moment we become self-aware, we begin to want. First food, then comfort, then love, sex, approval, achievement, security, status, transcendence. One desire leads to another, and then another. The moment we satisfy one urge, the relief is fleeting, like a breath held too long finally released, only to be followed by the anxiety of the next unmet desire. This cycle is not an accident. It is the very mechanism of life itself, and it is this mechanism that guarantees suffering. When our desires are thwarted, we suffer pain, frustration, and longing. But even when they are fulfilled, we fall into boredom, a dull emptiness, a restless hunger for something new. Life, Schopenhauer says, swings like a pendulum backward and forward between pain and boredom. In neither state do we find true peace. Take, for example, the common pursuit of success. You set a goal, a promotion, a degree, a creative project. You grind, sacrifice, endure. And when you achieve it, there's a brief high, a surge of euphoria. You feel powerful, but within days, or even hours, the feeling begins to fade. A new goal emerges, a new hunger arises. You begin again. Why? Because the will does not rest. It does not want satisfaction. It only wants to want. And this is the prison. You are caught in an endless loop of craving, like a machine whose fuel is dissatisfaction. This idea may sound bleak, even hopeless. But Schopenhauer would argue it is the opposite. It is the first step toward clarity. If you believe that happiness is just one more achievement away, one more relationship, one more purchase, one more transformation, you will spend your life in endless frustration. But if you recognize that the very nature of existence is built on this insatiable structure, you can stop blaming yourself. You can stop chasing illusions. And more importantly, you can begin to ask, if I cannot escape the will, is there a way to live with it? That's the question we'll confront next, by exploring how Schopenhauer believed we can survive and even transcend this suffering. If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. To understand the full depth of Schopenhauer's worldview, we must confront one of his most piercing metaphors, the pendulum of human existence. According to him, life swings endlessly between two poles, pain and boredom. At first glance, this may seem overly cynical, but look closely, and you'll see that this rhythm plays out in your own life almost every day. Pain arises whenever the will is denied, when you long for something and cannot have it. This could be physical pain, emotional suffering, anxiety, frustration, longing, jealousy, all of them symptoms of unfulfilled desire. In this phase of the pendulum, the will is screaming through you. It takes over your thoughts, narrows your attention, creates an illusion that your suffering will vanish if only you obtain the object of your desire. The partner, the promotion, the recognition, the breakthrough. And then, sometimes, you get it. You grasp the thing your will has been pursuing. And for a moment, there is silence. The ache subsides. You breathe. You feel something close to happiness. But this is the moment when the pendulum reaches its apex and then begins to swing in the other direction. Because with the desire now fulfilled, the will has nothing to grasp. And without striving, without wanting, without craving, you are left with emptiness. This is boredom, not the superficial, I don't know what to do, boredom, but a deeper existential boredom, a sense of meaninglessness that creeps in when the chase is over. The will, having no immediate target, turns inward. You begin to feel restless, agitated, unsatisfied once again, and soon a new desire appears. The pendulum swings back to pain. This is why happiness, at least as we commonly understand it, is a myth. Not because it's impossible to feel joy or pleasure, but because those states are temporary absences of suffering, not enduring states of being. Schopenhauer argues that what most people call happiness is merely the brief pause in pain, a fragile moment where the will is, for a time, quiet. But like a sleeping beast, it always awakens. Think of the last time you finally got something you wanted. Maybe you fell in love, bought a long-coveted item, finished a major goal. How long did the satisfaction last before a new form of discontent arose? This isn't a personal failure. It's a universal pattern. And yet, most people live in denial of this truth. They convince themselves that next time will be different, that the next achievement, the next love, the next milestone will be the one that finally brings lasting peace. Schopenhauer believed this illusion is not just common, it's dangerous. It keeps us running, suffering, blaming ourselves, and mistaking the structure of reality for a personal flaw. The tragedy is not that we suffer, it's that we expect not to. But if happiness is an illusion and suffering is inevitable, what then? Are we doomed to be helpless victims of the will? Or is there a way to respond to this condition with intelligence, even with dignity? In the next part, we'll explore how Schopenhauer believed we can do exactly that, not by escaping the will, but by learning how to bear it. Through philosophical understanding, aesthetic experience, and a radical shift in perspective, he offers strategies that can help us live not free from suffering, but free within it. 4. How to bear the unbearable. Schopenhauer's strategies for enduring existence. If suffering is the default condition of life, as Schopenhauer asserts, then the goal is not to escape it, because you can't. The goal is to learn how to bear it, and not just to endure it passively, but to respond with insight, with discipline, and with a deeper understanding of what it means to be human. For Schopenhauer, wisdom is not found in the pursuit of happiness, but in the reduction of unnecessary suffering. The first step toward this kind of philosophical endurance is intellectual clarity. When you understand that suffering is built into the structure of existence, that desire will never be fully satisfied, you stop tormenting yourself with questions like, "Why am I still unhappy?" or "What's wrong with me?" You realize that your pain isn't proof of failure, it's proof that you're alive. As Schopenhauer writes, a quick test of the assertion that enjoyment outweighs pain in life would be to compare the respective feelings of two animals, one of which is eating the other. But clarity alone isn't enough. The next strategy Schopenhauer offers is minimization of desire. He suggests that there are only two ways to increase happiness: either increase what you have or decrease what you want, and the latter is far more reliable. When you reduce the number of things you feel you must have in order to be at peace, you shrink the power of the will over your life. This is where practices like Stoic negative visualization become powerful. By contemplating the loss of what you already possess, health, relationships, security, you begin to appreciate them more deeply. You learn to want less, not more. Every desire you extinguish is one less source of future pain. This approach also invites a shift in lifestyle toward what Schopenhauer admired as voluntary simplicity. It means deliberately stepping away from desires that are imposed by society, rather than arising from genuine need. You stop chasing luxury for status, relationships for validation, or success for ego. In doing so, you reclaim mental space, emotional energy, and a quiet sense of control. The less you let culture define your values, the more you reduce the number of traps the will can set for you. Then comes a deeper transformation, the cultivation of universal compassion. Schopenhauer was one of the earliest Western philosophers to argue that compassion is not a moral commandment, but a metaphysical insight. When you realize that every being is a manifestation of the same will, suffering in different forms, the illusion of separation begins to dissolve. You recognize yourself in the stranger, the animal, even the enemy. Their pain is your pain, Their desperation is your own, in another body. From this awareness, a deeper, more honest compassion arises, not born of virtue, but of solidarity. You stop adding hatred, judgment, and cruelty to a world already soaked in suffering. And yet, even with clear understanding, fewer desires, and more compassion, the will does not stop. So how can we ever find rest? Schopenhauer offers one more key, a temporary but profound escape, a doorway out of the prison of the will. It is not through achievement or pleasure or control. It is through something far more subtle and far more powerful. In the next part, we will explore Schopenhauer's most transcendent strategy, the experience of aesthetic contemplation, how music, art, and beauty can silence the will, if only for a moment, and grant us a glimpse of peace. If suffering is the default condition of life, as Schopenhauer asserts, then the goal is not to escape it, because you can't. The goal is to learn how to bear it, and not just to endure it passively, but to respond with insight, with discipline, and with a deeper understanding of what it means to be human. For Schopenhauer, wisdom is not found in the pursuit of happiness, but in the reduction of unnecessary suffering. The first step toward this kind of philosophical endurance is intellectual clarity. When you understand that suffering is built into the structure of existence, that desire will never be fully satisfied, you stop tormenting yourself with questions like, "Why am I still unhappy?" or "What's wrong with me?" You realize that your pain isn't proof of failure, it's proof that you're alive. As Schopenhauer writes, a quick test of the assertion that enjoyment outweighs pain in life would be to compare the respective feelings of two animals, one of which is eating the other. But clarity alone isn't enough. The next strategy Schopenhauer offers is minimization of desire. He suggests that there are only two ways to increase happiness, either increase what you have or decrease what you want. And the latter is far more reliable. When you reduce the number of things you feel you must have in order to be at peace, you shrink the power of the will over your life. This is where practices like Stoic negative visualization become powerful. By contemplating the loss of what you already possess, health, relationships, security, you begin to appreciate them more deeply. You learn to want less, not more. Every desire you extinguish is one less source of future pain. This approach also invites a shift in lifestyle, toward what Schopenhauer admired as voluntary simplicity. It means deliberately stepping away from desires that are imposed by society rather than arising from genuine need. You stop chasing luxury for status, relationships for validation, or success for ego. In doing so, you reclaim mental space, emotional energy, and a quiet sense of control. The less you let culture define your values, the more you reduce the number of traps the will can set for you. Then comes a deeper transformation, the cultivation of universal compassion. Schopenhauer was one of the earliest Western philosophers to argue that compassion is not a moral commandment, but a metaphysical insight. When you realize that every being is a manifestation of the same will, suffering in different forms, the illusion of separation begins to dissolve. You recognize yourself in the stranger, the animal, even the enemy. Their pain is your pain. Their desperation is your own, in another body. From this awareness, a deeper, more honest compassion arises, not born of virtue, but of solidarity. You stop adding hatred, judgment, and cruelty to a world already soaked in suffering. And yet, even with clear understanding, fewer desires, and more compassion, the will does not stop. So how can we ever find rest? Schopenhauer offers one more key, a temporary but profound escape, a doorway out of the prison of the will. It is not through achievement or pleasure or control. It is through something far more subtle and far more powerful. In the next part, we will explore Schopenhauer's most transcendent strategy, the experience of aesthetic contemplation. How music, art, and beauty can silence the will, if only for a moment, and grant us a glimpse of peace. In a world ruled by the blind, insatiable will, is there any true refuge? Schopenhauer believed there is, and it doesn't lie in wealth, pleasure, or achievement. It lies in the rare, profound moments when the will goes silent, not because it has been satisfied, but because it has been bypassed. This escape is not through force, but through perception, through the disinterested contemplation of beauty. In Schopenhauer's philosophy, art is not entertainment, it is salvation. When you become fully absorbed in a painting, a piece of music, a work of literature, or a sublime landscape, something extraordinary happens. Your ordinary sense of self, the desiring, grasping, suffering self, dissolves. You are no longer the person who wants, who fears, who needs. You become, if only for a moment, pure subject, a being who simply perceives. The will, which normally drives every aspect of your existence, is momentarily suspended. Schopenhauer considered this state to be the closest thing to transcendence available in a world governed by suffering. It is not a permanent liberation, but a sacred pause. He wrote, "In the presence of beauty, we are no longer individuals, we are pure knowing beings. We stop interpreting the world in terms of utility. What can I get from this? And instead experience it as it is, outside the cycle of desire. That is why aesthetic experience can feel timeless. You forget yourself, you forget the world. The will is silent." Among all the arts, Schopenhauer gave music the highest status. He believed that while other arts represent the world, the forms and appearances shaped by the will, music is the will, expressed directly. It bypasses language and intellect entirely and speaks to the deepest layers of our being, a melancholic melody, a powerful crescendo, a single haunting chord. These don't just describe emotion, they are emotion. Music touches the will without triggering desire. It brings us close to the source without binding us to it. But aesthetic contemplation is not limited to high culture. You can experience it in nature, watching the waves crash against a cliff, staring into the vastness of the night sky, observing the stillness of a forest at dawn. In those moments, you are no longer thinking, calculating, or wanting. You are simply aware. And in that awareness, for a flicker of time, you are free. This form of transcendence is fragile. The will always returns. The mind begins to chatter again. The cravings resurface. But for Schopenhauer, even brief moments of aesthetic escape are enough to justify the value of art and beauty in a tragic world. They are reminders that while life is suffering, it is not only suffering. There are cracks in the walls of the prison, and through them we glimpse something beyond the cycle. Yet Schopenhauer was not naive. He knew that not everyone is able to dwell in aesthetic contemplation often or deeply. And for those who seek a more radical liberation, not temporary but transformative, there is another path, the path of renunciation. A path walked by saints, sages, and ascetics. A path where the will is not merely silenced, but actively denied. In the next part, we'll enter this final and most extreme realm of Schopenhauer's thought, where the human spirit confronts the will, not with beauty, but with discipline, self-denial, and a courageous refusal to participate in the game of endless desire. If what you're hearing resonates with you, you'll find real value in my ebooks. Beyond the Shadow breaks down Jung's core ideas, while Dialogues with the Unconscious gives you a 30-day path to apply them in your life. Both are linked in the pinned comment. While aesthetic contemplation offers a fleeting escape from the tyranny of desire, Schopenhauer recognized that for some, beauty is not enough. Some individuals are not content with momentary silences. They want liberation, not distraction, not comfort, but true freedom from the endless torment of the will. For these rare individuals, Schopenhauer offers a more radical path: voluntary renunciation. A conscious, deliberate rebellion against the very force that animates our existence. To renounce is not to hate life, but to see through its illusions. It means turning away from the seductive promises of pleasure, success, and identity, not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. When you fully understand that every desire is a new link in the chain, that every pursuit leads to another hunger, you stop asking, "What will satisfy me?" and begin asking, "What if I stop playing this game entirely?" This is the path of asceticism, not in the religious sense of self-punishment, but in the philosophical sense of self-mastery. Schopenhauer admired monks, sages, and mystics who voluntarily chose poverty, celibacy, solitude, and silence, not as acts of self-denial for their own sake, but as a conscious attempt to quiet the will at its source, to live with as few desires as possible, to say no to the next craving and the next, until the mind no longer expects satisfaction, and therefore no longer suffers from its absence. This is not a path for the faint of heart. It is not glamorous, not praised, not understood by society. In a culture that glorifies indulgence and ambition, renunciation looks like failure. But Schopenhauer saw it as the highest form of wisdom, the ultimate refusal to be a puppet of the will. For those not ready to withdraw from the world entirely, Schopenhauer still recommended micro-asceticism, small acts of resistance to the will. Skipping a pleasure you crave, deliberately enduring discomfort, practicing stillness in a world that demands constant stimulation. These acts train the mind to break its automatic obedience to desire. They remind you that the will is not you. It is merely a force moving through you, and you can choose not to act on it. But even in this practice, even in the midst of withdrawal, one truth remains: death is inevitable. And for Schopenhauer, this is not a curse. It is a release. In death, the will that drives your existence ceases its restless striving. You return to the silence from which you came. For those who have truly seen through the illusions of life, the fear of death fades. What is terrifying for those who still cling to desire becomes, for the wise, a final freedom. Yet before that final silence arrives, there remains a pressing question. How do we live now? Not as prisoners of the will, but as conscious beings aware of its power. Is there a way to carry our suffering with dignity? To move through this tragic world with less self-deception, less unnecessary pain, and more inner clarity? In the next part, we'll bring together all the threads of Schopenhauer's philosophy to explore how you can live with eyes wide open, not chasing happiness, not fleeing discomfort, but standing in full awareness of what life is, and choosing still to endure. After all the illusions have been stripped away, what remains? If pleasure is fleeting, happiness a mirage, and suffering a built-in feature of existence, not a flaw, but a mechanism, how do we go on living without falling into despair? Schopenhauer's answer is both somber and empowering. You endure, but not blindly, not numbly, and not with false hope. You endure with eyes open, with clarity, with a deeper understanding of the forces that govern your inner life. You recognize that the voice inside you, the one that always wants, that always needs, that always insists happiness is just one step away, is not your authentic self. It is the will speaking through you, using your mind as a vessel for its endless hunger. And once you see this, you gain something rare in this world: distance. You begin to observe your own cravings instead of obeying them. You learn to respond, not react. You stop asking, "How do I get what I want?" and start asking, "What is truly necessary?" Your relationship with suffering changes. It's no longer an enemy to be eliminated, but a companion to be understood. A signal, not a sentence. Living with this awareness means rejecting the shallow narratives that modern life sells you, that you're broken if you're not happy all the time, that fulfillment is a product you can buy, that peace is found in achievements or attention. It means turning inward, cultivating silence, simplicity, and compassion, not because they're fashionable, but because they liberate you from the tyranny of wanting. Schopenhauer never promised salvation. He never sugarcoated the human condition. But he gave us something more honest, a way to carry the burden of existence without being crushed by it, a way to suffer less pointlessly, to want more wisely, and to find moments, rare, fleeting, but real, of transcendence and quiet beauty. And maybe that's enough. Not a life free from suffering, but a life where suffering doesn't own you, where you can look the absurdity of existence in the eye and say, I see you. And still I continue. Now I want to hear from you. If any part of this message echoed something deep inside, something you've always felt but couldn't explain, leave a comment and share it. You're not alone in this. There are others walking the same path, asking the same questions, facing the same quiet war within. And if this video opened your eyes to something real, make sure you subscribe, because in the next video, we'll go even deeper. And trust me, you'll want to see it. It's important.